Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. It also gets uploaded as a YouTube channel under the channel of Zenitsu, on top of being on various other podcasting platforms for your viewing or listening pleasures. So today I'm going to be with my co-host Teddy, and we're going to be talking about all of the GenCon data that we had and taking a look at BT13 as a whole. There's still a lot left to BT13 as a meta, but we have enough data to look at between everything that we have to kind of get a firm grasp on where the direction of the meta is and kind of start cementing what the meta actually is. On top of that, if we have time, we're going to be talking about Ultimate Cups as well, because those are just around the corner. So, yeah, we have 5 whole Gen Con events worth of data to look at. That was just a lot of games played in a very short amount of time. And usually when I'm doing like my whole data calculations, I kind of notice a trend where after the third or fourth event, that's kind of when the meta kind of starts cementing itself, and the numbers don't necessarily change a whole lot unless there's like this big ginormous like upheaval in the perception of everything, and something like way out there starts doing insanely well. But this event, or not this event, this meta so far hasn't had any of that. It kind of has been behaving for the most part, exactly where I was expecting this meta to be.
Yeah, I think we're on the same boat there. We kind of had an idea that it really wasn't gonna be that different, to be 100% honest. Um, which I mean, the decks that are strong stay strong, and it doesn't change very much. All it is we added a few more, which is fine.
Yeah. So if anyone is curious, Gen Con is the like one of the biggest tabletop gaming conventions in North America. So there was just a slew of different news announcements, and games being played of all sorts and all shapes and varieties. And Gen Con hosted not only just online tournaments, but in person tournaments as well for some of the various card games. Digimon being one of them. We had, what, three? In terms of regionals, we had 3 online and 2 offline. They were all about the same size, but that's just because they had to actually have a limit on them. Uh, just because that's what Gen Con allowed. Like, they had to play a lot by Gen Con's rules versus Bandai's normal rules.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, like, on Sunday, they changed the format to best of one instead of best of three, which does skew the data a little bit. Not insanely a whole lot, but it does skew things a bit. But they had to do that because Lewis Stadium was closing, and they only had so much time to run the event. So to speed things up, they had to cut it to best of one. I will say, based on social media feedback, a lot of people kind of laughed at the fact that that was the move. Um, it
I mean, I
is
think it's funny. I
it,
do
it
think it's
is
funny as well.
it is more funny and sad. But from a business standpoint, they actually physically had to do that. So it's just an unfortunate side product on renting convention space, which is why like I would like if Bandai does more in-person tournaments not to always be attached to a convention, so that way they have a little bit more free reign to be able to do whatever they want, just like they did with nationals. Like, it's not that much more expensive to rent out a like space that's not tied to a convention.
No, I don't think it's that hard. I just don't know if they're willing to invest.
They're
That's
not.
the that's the problem I feel is will be the case for the foreseeable future. I just don't
They're
think they're willing to invest in it.
they're not. Bandai's really lazy. Like, they are really lazy and complacent when it comes to how they run a lot of their card games. Like, I don't know a whole lot on some of the other side of the Bandai spectrum when it comes to TCGs, how they're run, but they could get really lazy and complacent unless they just want a hardcore shell out. And I think they've treated Battle Spirits and One Piece a little bit better in person than online. So there's hope that maybe some of that love could be given to Digimon, considering how successful Digimon has been over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I don't see why they wouldn't, but we'll just have to wait and see till they do because clearly they're not doing it now.
Right.
Um,
But
but it's
semantics,
possible.
yeah, it is possible. Anything is possible. Digimon with Bandai has always been at the short end of the stick, and we as Digimon fans kind of know that. And in spite of how poorly Bandai has treated the IP, we know that we, the fans, are keeping it alive. Because if we all just decided to give up, so will Bandai. But because we don't, Bandai's forced to look at us and say, "Hi, I guess that we're gonna have to do something for these guys."
Yeah, they're just like, well, I guess we'll deal with them.
Yeah, I mean, I I don't know. Bandai be Bandai, and Bandai's weird. But BT13, we got 5 whole worth of tournament data to look at. I wish we had
Still,
that like matchup chart and some of the other more intricate data. But Eggman's data and what I was able to compile via Eggman's data, that's still pretty decent on terms of getting like a scope and grasp on where the meta is and kind of how and why things have developed the way they are. So, starting off with August 3rd, this was an online regional. There was 213 players, 7 rounds of Swiss, and the deck breakdown, there was 7 different decks that topped, which was pretty decent. And then this is like where the meta shifts kind of were interesting, considering there was seven Hunters decks that topped. Everyone was thinking that would be like what Shine Greymon looks like, but the fact that Hunters is still this strong, and I think some people were just hardcore sleeping on it just because new and exciting decks they want to try. I think like Hunters doing this well is not a shock to anyone. But as far as what actually won that tournament, it was Shine Greymon.
yeah, I mean, I don't see why anyone would have thought otherwise because Hunters is very strong. Like, it didn't lose anything. It didn't lose any steam. Its removal is still the best in the game, borderline the best in the game. Um, I mean,
Its
there's
speed,
no downside.
consistency, yeah, its speed, consistency, and ability to respond are very hard to match for where the current state of the game is.
So I don't. I'm not surprised at all that people were like, you know what, Hunters is still strong. Let's go back to it.
Yeah, I mean
Completely understand.
we've done that in the past where it's just like, oh, Blue Hybrids is still low key
Yeah.
best deck in the format. Sure, let's go back to that one now that we're done playing with the new and exciting toys and we realize they're not necessarily that much
Or
stronger
worse.
than that much stronger than what we've already been playing. And I think like that's kind of the sentiment, which a lot of this data that I'm gonna end up showing you after we go through all of the events kind of shows that there is kind of like a power ceiling that Bandai understands. And I've said this before in the past, but like the fact that they understands that power ceiling and they try not to raise it a whole lot really puts a lot of these older decks on equal footings with a lot of the newer decks that are coming out. Usually the newer decks are perceived or actually are a little bit stronger because they like to do kind of like a waterfall approach where it's just like the new stuff should be stronger, but the stuff that came out last set should be the second strongest stuff. And that's kind of true here to an extent.
Yeah, I agree there. I don't think much has changed, and even all the decks that are good stayed being on top here.
But as far as the rest of the top 16 breakdown, obviously Shine ended up taking it. Second place was Greymon, more specifically Black War Greymon. Then we have in third place Hunters, fourth place Blue Flare, fifth place Blue Flare, sixth place All Force, seventh place Hunters, eighth place Hunters, ninth place Hunters, 10th place Shine, 11th place Hunters, 12th place Hunters, 13th Hunters, 14th Shine, 15th Bloom, and 16th Beelzemon. Hey, look, Beelzemon's still meta. There was 7 Hunters, 3 Shines, 2 Blue Flares, 1 Greymon, 1 All Force, 1 Bloom, 1 Beelzemon. That was what that event looked like. And I think it was a pretty solid event. Play TCG is pretty okay. Sometimes the in between rounds was a little bit long, but that's because they're doing a whole bunch of other stuff to try to make things run as smoothly as possible. And from my experience, playing in their events and playing not in this event specifically, but just playing at one of their GenCon events, it was pretty smooth.
Okay, I didn't get to play in these ones, so I am interested. I do look forward to my chance to actually play, but I want to play in an in-person one. I don't want to play an online one if I can help it. But hopefully I get the chance to play in one of these ones because I would like to play. I haven't gotten to play in any of the Gen Con events.
Yeah. And then moving on to Friday, so that was Thursday's event because Gen Con, like most conventions, day 0 is basically day 1. So that was Thursday. Friday is the one that I participated in. I didn't do super hot. My matchups were not in my favor, and my deck was kind of bricking a little bit. But my own personal performance aside, this is where like we kind of start seeing obviously a lot of repeats. There's not really a whole lot of new stuff that's breaking into the meta in terms of top 16s compared to what we've seen, not necessarily in the past, but like we've already reached a stabilization point for the most part where whatever's topping is kind of just known to be topping. And there's still lots of really strong decks. They just have to prove themselves, and that's an easier said than done feat. Just because of attention and play rate and all matchups, all that other stuff. But Friday's event, Shine ended up winning again. Second place was Bloomlord. Third was Beelzemon. Fourth was another Jessmon. Fifth place was a Greymon, more specifically War Greymon with the whole Dorbic splash in it, just so it could use Ragna as like the game finisher. Sixth place was Shine. Seventh place was Mirage. Eighth place was Allforce. Ninth place was Royal Knights. 10th place was Blue Flare. 11th place was War Greymon. Then we have 12th place with Royal Knights. 13th on Alpha. 14th Shine. 15th Greymon. 16th was Shine Greymon. And then the 15th place was more specifically Black War Greymon X. It's kind of nice to see that between Black War Greymon and War Greymon, they're both kind of getting equal amounts of love this format. I personally think for where the format is, Black War Greymon probably is the better deck, but against like Royal Knights more specifically, I definitely think War Greymon is more favored because the raid just kills whatever they're trying to play.
Yeah, I think the raid is a little bit better against that matchup in particular. I think the raid is a little better into more matchups, actually, looking at the meta at the current moment.
Yeah, and then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we had 10 different archetypes represented in top 16. The majority of it being Shine Greymon, Greymon, and Royal Knights, and then a whole bunch of one-ofs. So
that legend Ashton over there with Jessmon.
Yeah.
That dude's a hero, man.
And it looks like Kevin actually gave up on security control and he's playing Royal Knights, which is basically like security control, so nothing's really changed there.
I was like, is it really that different? Like,
it really kind of isn't.
Play big guys that kill things, stall until you can kill them.
Yeah, I'm basically not huge on shouting out names, but there are a couple of things to note. which there are some names that do stand out, and I'll get into like one of the big ones when we're getting more nitty gritty into some like the looking at the data as a whole. So that was Friday's online event. Then
Yep.
we have Saturday's online event. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 different decks represented in top 16, which is still pretty good. It's like that's a pretty healthy spread for a single event out of top 16. The majority of it was Shine. Then there was a decent amount of Hunters, Bloom Lord, Blue Flare, and then a whole bunch of other stuff that got that was only the only one represented. But Hunters actually took this event. So Shine did not top this event and win it. Second place was Red Hybrids. Always nice to see Red Hybrids do well. I think Red Hybrids is in a really interesting position in this format because it has some really good matchups and then it has some really bad matchups, but I think it's more good than bad at this point, considering Machine German, for the most part, it's still meta playable and it's still meta relevant, but it's not as prominent, and that's the deck's biggest weakness.
Yeah, and I think now that that's kind of just gone for the most part, because nobody's really playing it as much, gives it free reign to do exactly what it was doing beforehand.
And then as far as the rest of the decks, third was Bloom, fourth was Shine, fifth was Shine, sixth was Alpha, seventh was Bloom, eighth was Beelstar, which actually managed to break into the meta. And right now, I would probably just label that as it got lucky. But I do like what the tech that Beelstar was using to be able to get into this position to begin with. Because I do think, like, with
Yeah,
these more off-meta decks, it really does require a lot more on the skills of the player to not only pilot, but the deck that they're actually building to take into the event.
yeah, I really dig the whole Gizumon engine in the deck. It essentially does exactly what Bailstar wants. I like it a lot.
Yeah. We'll probably go over decks a little bit more specific, but here's just the snapshot if you're actually watching this. Um, so I'll just leave that one up because that deck is kind of unique and interesting.
I
Uh,
know that's really cool. Really
yeah.
cool.
Then we had ninth place as Jespon, 10th place Shine, 11th Shine, 12th Mirage, 13th Blue Flare, 14th Shine, 15th Blue Flare, and 16th Hunter. So, pretty decent spread. And all of these events are going to be around, like, they're going to be 200 plus players, all 7 rounds. I should have probably mentioned that. Um, so, they're all pretty comparable in terms of, like, size to one another. A little bit smaller than some of the other regionals, considering most of the other online regionals not attached to GenCon, at least for North America, was around the 400 player mark. So that is a huge difference, but round count wise,
Not too much.
not too much. It's only 1 round off. Um,
Yeah, so it shouldn't matter in the long term.
right. I mean, it's all scalable. So that, like, with statistics, it's all scalable. So there's still a lot that we can infer.
Yeah.
Uh, And then moving on to the offline events, which were ran Saturday and Sunday at Gen Con itself. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there was another event. This is another event with 10 playable or 10 decks that were able to manage to get into top 16. Again, you could kind of see this very similar spread. Not a whole lot is like breaking in or changing, and there is kind of reason behind that. But this event, Blue Flare ended up winning. Second place went to Belfmon. Third place went to Shine. Fourth, Greymon on Black War Greymon more specifically. Fifth, Shine. Sixth, Security Control. Seventh, Hunter. Eighth, Shine. Ninth, Shine. 10th, Belfmon again. 11th, Mirage. 12th, Greymon, more on Black War Greymon X. 13th, Cross Hearts. 14th, Beelzemon. 15th, Alphamon. And 16th, Greymon, or Shine Greymon. So I think this is the event that Security Control broke into top 16s.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
sixth place.
yeah, and their list is pretty interesting. They're definitely more focused on Digimon than on the options itself, and they're trying to run a whole bunch of different colors. Again, we'll go over like some of the more interesting builds after talking about all 5 events. But if you're a video watcher, then you could see a little bit of a snapshot in terms of what their build is. And then the last event, we do have to preface this with it being best of one. It does shift and skew the data a little bit, but I think it's still something worth talking about because these are still all like we're not seeing a huge change outside of the fact that like Dorbikmon and Machinedramon were finally able to use this event to break into top 16. I think maybe they might not have been able to get into top 16 if it wasn't best of one. So that's something noteworthy because outside of
That
that,
makes sense.
everything, yeah, outside of that, everything else has been the same. And I'm not saying like these are bad decks. Obviously, they're still good and they could still take games, but who knows? Like it was best of one.
Yeah, that does tend to lean into more sacky decks for the most part. Getting able to break in, as we see with Dorbik, is a prominent example of that, of a sacky deck that just can outright steal a game without you really even getting the chance.
Right, because in best 2 of 3, uh, sure it could sneak in one win, game one, but if you like, it all comes down to like deck consistency and like okay, what were the conditions in which they won? Did the opponent brick and not see anything? Did you see the absolute nuts? Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And a deck like Dorbikmon is prone to do better in best of one, especially since we've seen that from a lot of Japanese data. It was like OTK decks like that generally do better because there's less opportunity to be able to, play more games and actually have a fighting chance.
Yeah, less chance to brick, more chances to just get that one game to go, and then you just steamroll the one game. That's all you
Yeah.
really need in the best of one. So
But the top 16 breakdown, Greymon won, more specifically Black War Greymon. I know Eggman has labeled just the deck Greymon and then in like parentheses put like more specifically. And that's just because like the Greymon decks at this point are just all over the place. So it's really hard to pinpoint like, hey, like these are basically almost the same deck. You're just focusing a little bit more on control versus aggro, and that's like the only real big difference is just the level 5s and the level 6s. And even then, they sometimes will do like absolutely wild amounts of crossover between them. So they're Greymon as a whole is just a very muddy thing.
yeah, it doesn't. It, they're all it's they're all the same deck up until you get to like level sixes, and then maybe the level fives. But like for the most part, they're essentially all the same deck.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is why he just labeled it as Greymon and then in parentheses put what the actual more specific Greymon is. And I think that's a smart way of doing it. I would do the exact same because I've been like using Red Black Greymon as just the general broadened term because that's literally what the deck is.
yeah,
But as far as the rest of the top 16 breakdown, we have in second place Red Hybrids, always nice. Third place Belfmon, fourth place Shine, fifth place Machinedramon, sixth place Hunters, seventh place Greymon, more specifically Black War Greymon, eighth place Shine, ninth place Bloomlord, 10th place Belfmon, 11th place Greymon, more specifically Black War Greymon, 12th place Dorbik. I could swear I've seen Liam's name before. I know I've seen 13th place Tyler before. Shout out to GFG Tyler.
oh yeah,
Chill
Tyler's
dude,
here.
great player. This is where he got his invite, so congrats to that. Um, 14th place was Shine Greymon. 15th place was Alphamon, and 16th place was another Shine Greymon. So this is kind of where I want to take the opportunity to shout out one more player, and that's George Doggins. Um, Jogensis. I'm butchering his last name. I do apologize, George. But his first name is George. And he has had through this event, and by event I mean GenCon as a whole, probably the most success considering he was the majority of Belfamon tops. There was two other players outside of him that topped with Belfamon. Outside of that, literally he has been doing almost all of the heavy lifting in terms of top 16 representation, which is cool. Not saying that like other Belfamon players need to get on his level. It's just he is obviously understands the deck and has fine-tuned the deck even post all of the different events, to the point where he can make Belfamon successful consistently.
Yeah, I like his list a lot. His list is like what most of the Belfamon players have tended to default to.
Is that which list of his are you talking about? Because
The most recent.
the most recent. Okay, so I guess going into more decks specifically, we could start with his just because again he has topped the most out of all of these events. So, um, as far as I can tell, the only spicy like tech that he's doing is he's running the Nidhogg's for some extra memory generation, which I don't disagree with. And then
Nah,
he has the
they've all
Ogremon.
defaulted to that. The Ogremon's definitely the big one.
Yeah, most people
Um,
wouldn't really think about Ogremon because we have Pascamon, but I like after playing against him, um Ogremon definitely really caught me off guard and has caught me in a bad position while also making sure that he for sure can get his hand size down to the level it needs in case he needs to get his hand size down, while removing slightly higher level bodies than what Pasco can do. And you're just going to be playing it for free off of Ostamon's ability anyway.
yeah, exactly. So it's for the most part just a net gain for the deck. I
Yeah.
like it a lot.
And
It
then
just makes sense.
Yeah, and then his other tech card is the BT6 Intmon because you could just use it to trash an option card, which the best option to probably trash is probably Gifted Darkness because against certain matchups, that card literally would do
Useless.
nothing.
In a good amount of the matchups, it's utterly useless.
Yeah, so you would just most likely pitch that card to be able to grab any Demon Lord, like 7 Great Demon Lord, from your trash, which you obviously would use to grab more sleep modes, so that way you could use your sleep modes over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, I just like it a lot. It just makes sense.
Yeah, outside of that, I'm not seeing anything like crazy. Although the fact that he's
And
running
Matt
4 eggs,
Ishida
yeah,
is also something too.
Matt Ishida is just another retrieval card. It's just a good memory fixer too, like purple's best generic memory fixer. And then the fact that he's only running 4 eggs is also kind of like a surprise. I know a lot of people, myself included, like running 5 eggs because of Proto, so that way we can make sure we have enough eggs, um, to use our level threes as well as the Protos. So that's another big change.
I think it makes sense because more often than not, sometimes it's just better to build the stack, like the Vasco in the back, and just slam the Proto anyway for 3.
Yeah,
Um,
you have
Unless you just
options.
need to climb.
Right.
So I like the idea of it.
It gives you options on how you could approach what you want to build and what memory you're comfortable with leaving the opponent at. And I think like that's like a huge plus to how Belfmon can play is it has some really weird alternative plays that a lot of like what traditional Digimon is, this doesn't follow a lot of those norms.
No, not even close.
It like does and it doesn't because you're using the Gizus to basically sack each other as the in quotation marks digivolution cost, but you're not actually digivolving. So like it is really weird and a very unique deck.
I mean, I love it. Uh, I mean, I love my fucking Belphamon. Excuse my language. I love the deck a lot. I think there's so much merit to it, and his deck is just an extremely refined version of it.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly like what to put in, when to do it. I like it a lot. I mean, there's just not much else to say.
And then as far as looking at some of the other lists from the best of one event, Machine German. This was the time Machine German had success in this format as of right now. It is incorporating Chikurimon as a good floodgate, mostly for the Royal Knights. And I think like that's what a lot of decks are doing. If you have the availability to play a card to hose on Royal Knights, you're going to be playing it. So there's a
Yeah,
decent amount of floodgates that stop Royal Knights with like the you can't reduce play costs effect. Outside of that, I'm not really seeing anything like super weird or out of the ordinary. I know some decks kind of teched out the or the EX1 Machine Dramon, and it's nice to see it being teched back in, just because there is a lot of DP reduction thanks to Shine Greymon.
yeah. I think they have to kind of push back into that so that you can get it under the Chaos Dramon X to get it like that massive stack that nobody can touch. Um, I think they kind of had to do it. I like it though. I think another the Mercury mod is nice. Death X coming back into the deck is also
Yeah,
quite
most don't even
nice.
run Death X, so
That's
it's
why I was like
definitely
very
nice to
surprising to
see.
see.
Yeah. And then Izzy, the memory fixing tamer, because it's
Yeah,
one of the cheapest memory fixing tamers because
three
uh
costs essentially,
yeah, there are a couple
assuming you
of
don't hit.
pure red cards in the deck that can make Izzy whiff, but
It's only two though.
yeah,
Not
and
that bad.
it's not even that bad if it does whiff. You just don't gain the memory, but you could still rearrange the top to whatever you feel like you need. So it's not that bad.
Yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah, and then
So
the new inclusion is the EX4 Metal Greymon, just because he natively has blocker, and then his inheritable is just generically giving blocker. So he's just another really solid card.
yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, it's just a fairly coherent Machine Dramon deck. I mean, Machine Dramon will do what Machine Dramon does.
Yeah, the Dorbic list, on the other hand, this is where, like, compared to a lot of other Dorbic lists in the past, this is where things get kind of spicy. I think they forgot to put the
What is going
Digitamas in
on?
here, but based on the
It's
Guilmon,
usually the yeah. It's
yeah,
usually Gigimon.
based on the draw Guilmon, it's probably the draw Gigimon. And then the only surprises that I'm seeing is like
Victory
the Icemon
Green.
scatter mode, because it is a dark dragon. You could hard play it for cheap just to try to cycle through your deck and chip. Like it's a pretty spicy card. It's not bad. Another spicy card is the Black Growlmon from EX4 or 3. No, that's EX4.
EX4, yeah, because it mills the two, adds any Growlmon back essentially. So I like it. It makes sense.
Uh,
Um,
the Ground German is a definite surprise. Cause that's a vanilla card.
I don't know why you'd want this.
I think
I'm
it's literally just a hard play for 5. Like if you know the opponent has a memory fixing tamer, they put you to 2. You just hard play this for 5. Pass them to their 3 anyway. And they are running a Metallic Dramon and a
a
Victory
Victory
Greymon.
Greymon.
Yeah, so they're probably just trying to use that card to be able to play those cards more efficiently.
Yeah, just turbo into one of those to stall for a little bit or nuke the board. I like.
Yeah, and then
No, it makes sense.
they do have some solid level 7s, but the rest of the deck kind of seems fairly standard outside of those cards.
Yeah, Death X and Merciful Mode. I like that.
Yeah. But it's definitely
Two
cool seeing
tokens.
those decks break into the meta. Then as far
Yo, that's
as
crazy. Actually, you slam Dorbig, tuck the two level sixes, Merciful Mode, nuke an
that also
entire
is a
board.
yeah, that also is a line of play, just using Dorbic to
That's
shove
kind of
whatever you want.
crazy. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot.
It's definitely spicy. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know how good it is, but I think it's pretty cool. Uh,
Hey, at least we
it
know it could
worked.
be good in best of one. Yeah.
It did work, so can't say nothing because he did good.
Yeah, and then security control. This is a deck that a lot of people hate, myself included. But I think like this approach I'm more okay with, if that makes any sense. Like I hate the deck just in concept of like just trying to recover, stall out the
Security control?
opponent as best as you possibly can. Like I just find that to be so mind numbing. But
Oh,
I like the usage of security Digimon here to try to actually, progress the game state and push it forward. Then they have some DNAs to be able to use the security
this.
Digimon, which is also extra spicy. Would never have thought a security control would even attempt that. And then they just have the Shadow Seraphi and Sword
Yeah, but
top ends.
these DNAs are crazy. You know,
Yeah,
Sylphie and Shaco, that's dope.
the cool part is he's using Keenan to be able to trigger the ability to gain memory on the opponent's turn when they're checking security. So it's basically like an extra version of Kari from BT4. Yeah, BT4 Purple Kari. Except this has an on play effect that you could actually take advantage of with the fact that you could try to gain some extra memory during your turn when it's played, and draw an extra card if the opponent doesn't trash a card from their hand, which is extra spicy.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. Outside of that, I'm not really seeing anything too crazy. They're not running. Yeah, they're not running the whatchamacallit, Chaos Degradation or the Lone K. Instead, they're electing to use Heaven's Judgment. And they're playing a lot of different colors, so it makes sense because Heaven's Judgment can just nuke the field if you have enough different colors on your field.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine, oh my god, dude, having like the DNAs or having, holy cow, dude, the amount of DP reduction.
Yeah, because I think they're literally using every color but green is represented in here. Yeah, literally every color but green is represented.
That's crazy, dude. That's cool. This is a super cool list.
No, I appreciate the ingenuity that went into this because most people. Oh, the eggs finally loaded. Oh wait, no, those are different eggs because this is also using the Guilmon draw engine as well to have more, draw and control. So I definitely appreciate the creativity and ingenuity that went into a list like this. And people have been trying to play a list like this for a while and haven't necessarily found the success, but now we have a good base to go off of. Um, and I dig it. I like what this is doing a lot.
Yeah, I really like this. This looks really, really cool. Um, and if I was to play against a security control matchup and it was this, I'd probably be all right. Like, I'd be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. You can beat me, man.
I mean, yeah. And then the other super interesting list is the Beelstar list. So, as mentioned before, the Beelstar list is actually using the Gizumon package. And I think, like, the Gizumon package, even though you're not running the Tamer, it's still really good at just cycling through the deck, which is exactly what Beelstar wants. It wants to have specific cards in your hand and specific cards in your trash. And then it's just doing all of the normal Beelstar stuff on top of that. You have a little bit of Mill, you have a little bit of Floodgates, the spicy tech that even Beelstar, or not exclusively to Beelstar, I mean, what Beelzemon has started to do is run Shine Greymon Ruin mode as well, because that just buys you a turn. It is such an impressive card when that hits the field.
Yes, it really just is an impressive car. Um, it's really cool, but it's very impressive.
Yeah, and then they're just running like the cool thing is you could use it in combination with Darkness Wave, just because it is a part yellow card, so it makes Darkness Wave to be able to try to mill yourself a little bit better. Then you have some good retrieval cards like Matt and Calling from the Darkness. Darkness Wave, if you have your Shine out, also helps you grab cards back. And then outside of that, it is literally just here's a toolbox of good 7 costed options to just kill stuff like Rivals, Fly Bullet, Trump Sword, Happy Bullet, Gwalt Schwarmer for wide fields. Like it's just a solid list.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Bale-Star list a lot. It looks really cool. It's not too crazy, but I don't think it needs to be crazy, to be honest.
No, it's just very classical because like it's merging what Beelstar wants to do between the old one and the new one as best as it possibly can, while making use of all of the different tools that purple has. And I think like purple is just that color where you could do some of the most crazy and wild stuff, and it just can work because of the different mechanics purple plays around with, and it all stems from using the trash.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say anymore. It just looks good. I like it a lot. I probably might try this.
Yeah, as far as that, I don't really know if there's anything else worth like super highlighting in terms of like uniqueness in decks. Because I think everything has been kind of mostly straightforward. I know there's like two different shines where you have your more aggro shine and then you have your more control shine. And the more control shine is using BT2 Shine Greymon as alternative ways to suspend your tamers to be able to get their effects off while controlling the field, versus the aggro shine that just is more about the combo and more about the unga bunga.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they won't deviate too much from each other, just because they kind of can't. To be
Yeah,
fair, just because names and things like that, they kind of have to use the same pieces. It'll just basically change based on ratios and things of that nature, which is not that interesting, but it is what it is. Those decks are just strong because they're strong.
right. And this kind of leads me to the data that I like to put together myself. And that is like a little bit of a meta breakdown, so to speak. So I just go through all of these events. I have an Excel spreadsheet that I just throw them all into and do a whole bunch of like behind the scenes math and calculations. So I've kind of calculated. I know the image isn't really well organized. I usually organize it in post, but I just want to get the data out initially. So, out of all of the different events, we have 128 decks that made it into top 16. Out of all of the different decks, we have a total of 18 different decks that were able to break into top 16. This is including the best of one data. I do have a similar chart for without the best of one data, but this is kind of where we could see where one data set of event at this point isn't really going to be changing the math a whole lot. So I'm just going to quickly have the not best of one so you could kind of see the slight differences in percentages. Like Shine right now, just as an example, without the best of one data, he's at about 30% representation in top 16s throughout all of these events. With the top 16, he goes down one whole percent. Whoop de doo.
Yeah, like it's that bad. Like it's that much to be that different. Like it's negligible at most.
Yeah, so I'm just going to be going over the data set that includes the best of one. Even though, like, again, this isn't made to be super hyper accurate. This is just to get a, like, base representation on what the meta currently is and the direction that we could uh, see it going based on everything that has been topping. But usually, what I like to equate to a healthy format is at least 15 decks are able to top, and seeing us at 18 makes me think that this is a pretty healthy format as of right now. We still obviously have more to go. I don't think we're doing anything super competitive in terms of regionals until what the starter decks come out.
Yeah,
So we have
October,
Rising Winds that we're basically skipping, and then the starter decks plus Rising Winds will be the next regionals in October.
which uh I mean I'll make a prediction there probably won't impact that much. The starter decks might, but not the I don't think Rising Wind will do too much to be 100% honest.
Well, Rising Wind only has four new decks to come out of it. It is Gamamon, it is Jellymon, it is Angoramon, and it is Manzemon. And based on the Japanese data, they really didn't impact the format that much there. They get a couple of tops here and there, but most of the time they're just lumped in with just a lot of the other decks that were able to top just a small handful of times.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I assume they, well, I don't assume I know. I know they probably won't do too much unless somebody finds a way to break them very hard, which could be possible too. Um, I just don't see it, but
I mean,
you
I
never
would
know.
have preferred to play Jellymon this format too, to be honest. Like, if I had the option for the regional that I played in last for BT13, I wanted to play Jellymon. I was expecting to see a whole bunch of Shine and Tamer based decks, and Jellymon kind of wants to try to hose on them. Even though we're missing the promo level 6 to help round out the deck, that deck just still looks like a lot of fun.
It looks super cool. Okay, decks look cool. I love the way they play. They look dope too. I just don't think they're that great. That's all.
Yeah, but as far as like looking at this summarized estimation of the meta, obviously Shine Greymon is the number one deck. I don't think that's gonna be changing anytime soon, considering how much of a lead he has compared to all of the other decks. But this is where things kind of get interesting because we have Hunters as the second best deck as of right now, followed by Greymon, split between obviously Black War and War Gray. I think at this point, Black War has like a little bit more of a lead in terms of like the difference between Black War and War Gray's representation. But because they're so similar, I just labeled it as this. And even if I were to split the decks apart, it would still be very highly ranked. If they even if they weren't split apart. Then Bloomlord is the fourth best deck in the format, and the fifth best deck of the format is going to be Royal Knights. So
Interesting.
yeah, so that's kind of your top 5 decks breakdown. If you were to go into an event, those are probably the safest decks that you could think about taking into that event if you're looking to try to win.
Interesting. I like that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
look.
And then if we could just take a look at all of the other numbers, they're actually pretty close and fairly even with each other, which is definitely a good sign because, again, as I mentioned with that power ceiling, they really understand where that is. And the fact that new decks can enter in top 16 and a lot of the current decks also are like still pretty good shows that this is actually a healthy format. And Bandai really is understanding their game a lot better.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. I think right now this meta is quite good. I think we have a lot of opportunities for decks that aren't just these top decks that you see to do well. You just need to right event, right time, plan out your techs. I think this is probably going to be one of the better metas for us, if not one of the best metas in the game's history currently. So I'm quite excited to keep throwing hands in and keep playing. Uh, it should be a good time.
Yeah. And looking forward to Ultimate Cup, we could kind of use some of this data to kind of like guesstimate what's actually going to be doing well. And there was a GenCon Ultimate Cup that was ran. We don't have the top 16 breakdown, but we do know what the top 4 decks were. And it was literally Mirage Gao, followed by Blue Flare, and then Mirage Gao and Mirage Gao as the top 4 decks. So it's not like we didn't see this coming when it comes to Ultimate Cups, because the best way that I like to look at Ultimate Cups is like, hey, what was actually good in the main format, and then what's actually monocolor and what could work with monocolor. And then I just kind of literally go from there in terms of like what actually would be good to take to an Ultimate Cup.
Yeah,
So if we go back to my handy dandy little chart, we could kind of just start to guess what actually is going to do well during Ultimate Cup season. just because these are the monocolored decks that the game is playing with. We know that Shine got a limitation, so people are probably not going to be super keen on Shine because that limitation significantly slows down the deck. And I think that's what they're trying to do with Ultimate Cup is slow the format down to try to breathe some new life into it. But unfortunately, Mirage, even though he's not one of the top 5 decks, he definitely is one of the best monocolor decks. So no shocker that he didn't get any hits. There's no limitations to his game plan, and he's just one of the faster decks that's left currently in the meta.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, it's just one of those things like the blue decks when untouched, they kind of just steamroll. I mean,
Yeah,
you can
because
look at these and
Bloomlord.
they're just
Yeah,
absurd.
because Bloomlord got hit with something. Red Hybrids has to adjust a little bit. It's not out of the realm of possibility for Red Hybrids to do well. Um, but you lose the Boko and that free evolution that sometimes can make or break games. On top of the fact that you also can't run Neemon if your deck already was running Neemon, means that you have to figure out alternative ways to be able to play your Tamers. And then going into some of these blue decks like Mirage, they just bounce your Digimon if they live through the security, and then that makes things significantly worse for you. I think Alphamon can do pretty well. He doesn't have any limitations.
No, I think Alphamon's pretty solid at the current moment. So, which it makes sense. I mean, why would it not do well? It's Alphamon and it's nothing. What I mean, what nothing's touched from it. No, yeah. So
Yeah, literally
it's
nothing's touched outside of its native restriction. You can't use X antibody and you can't use Cool Boy. I lied. Maybe that does change it to make Alphamon not good, because without Cool Boy, your acceleration and search is significantly worse. There is a version that has topped in the past for Ultimate Cup for Alphamon, so I know it's possible. They just have to make some adjustments, and I don't think players are going to do that.
no. I'll take a wager they probably are not going to.
Belfamon is a pretty decent deck as long as you don't go up against Blue Flare or Mirage. That's a pretty tough matchup for Belfamon as a whole because Blue Flares will just stun and ignore the deletion that Belfamon has, and then Mirage just adds enough cards into the hand where your Belfamon just reasonably doesn't do anything.
I think Mirage is definitely a lot harder than the blue flare matchup, but just because you can just stall the blue flare matchup, um, if you need to, and they can't keep things on the board because you'll just nuke everything. But the Mirage matchup, they just don't do anything. They'll just sit in the back, wait till they're ready, and then as long as they are giving you cards in hand or waiting, they don't. As patience, they just have patience. They'll just win over more often than not. Um, Whereas Blue Flare kind of has to put the aggro on, and when they do, then they can get punished. But I
They just
agree
have
though; those are definitely the harder matchups to play. Those are definitely the two hardest matchups. But I don't think the Blue Flare matchup is that incredibly bad, at least from experience. I don't think it's the worst.
no.
It's not fun, but it's not the worst.
And
I
then
still think Mirage is infinitely worse to play against.
yeah, the fact that All Force is also a really strong blue deck that also didn't get any limitations makes that deck more viable as well. Considering like it's already almost on par in terms of representation in top 16 with Mirage. So that's another deck to look out for. Um, I don't necessarily think that people are going to be super keen with Beelsmon or Beelstar, just because I think there was an extra limitation to Beelzemon, and I think Beelstar, you could reasonably consider playing it because you have enough options uh, and enough cards in just purple where you don't need any off-color stuff. But who knows? It just takes experimentation, and that definitely has proven that it can do something, especially with the Gizumon package being added in to be able to stand out. So maybe Beelstar might be a good purple pick. Um, what would be a good green deck? Because like I think people aren't gonna really play Machine Dramon without Analog Man. I don't. People are probably still gonna be on Greymon just because you still have a lot of really solid tools for Greymon to do well, and then you just still have the Ragna play that they were relying on before. So nothing's really changed now. So that'll still be a good deck to take. Like, is
Green
I don't think
art.
people are going to shift on to Rosemon because that's just a worse version of Bloom.
Uh, yeah, I think it's a more fair version. So yeah, I kind of agree there. It'd be kind of hard to switch. I mean, people could. I just don't think it's better.
No, because I think like the second best Rosemon is actually the campaign rare, just because it has Digisorption, so you could still use a lot of the Bloomlord pieces for paying for the Digisorption to go into that card. But I just zero protection. It's not very fast. It doesn't hit very hard. It just doesn't seem like it's really going to be worth playing.
No, I think it's I don't know. I mean, I think the Rose verse mode is actually quite absurdly strong. Um,
It's not
and
bad.
I think it's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. Because being that, I mean, it still does. It's basically Quartzmon, but you could do it for free with less investment
Yeah,
needed to
maybe
actually get value from it.
maybe they'll just use it to try to turbo into Rose Burst or Quartz. Like, I don't know. I think it's still going to be a little bit harder for that deck to perform because it also doesn't really
Correct.
have a whole lot of protections. So, Mirage could just literally sit there and wait while you don't kill them, and then once they have combo, they just combo off and kill you.
Yeah, but that's kind of just how it'll always be, though. There's really not. I think it's fine. They could just play Bloom, and just it will just be a nerfed version of it. But and Bloom, like for example, like the last Ultimate Cup I played in, it was with the hit to Hydra, and that and they would just literally all they did was just turbo into Quartzmon.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're still gonna try to do. So like
I'm
Turbo
like,
Quartzmon is probably still the best green deck. Outside
unless
of that,
Quartz gets touched, which I don't think it is going to. Um, I think that's all they're gonna do. They'll just stick with the Quartzmon turbo, and it will work. People will win games because Quartzmon alone is enough.
yes, and like as far as like other meta predictions in terms of what Ultimate Cup has in store for us, maybe this will be the format that Gallantmon rises to prominence because of all of the new tools that he has gotten. Somebody could put something together, and because this format is supposedly slower outside of a couple of decks, maybe he actually has a shot of doing well.
I don't think so, but at least from testing, I still think he's still too slow. Um, but maybe somebody can find something. I don't know. I've been playing it a lot, and I still don't feel very good about it. I still think there's a lot of things the deck needs before it could even say it's good enough.
Yeah.
Because the best part of the deck is the not even like the main engine. It's just the milling. Honestly, like everything else about the deck is kind of mid, um, which sucks because I love the deck very much. But I can I can know that one part of the deck is definitely most of the deck is awful, excluding the mill. That's literally just it. Like, which sucks. But it's okay. Maybe somebody will figure something out that I'm not seeing, which could be possible. I mean, or it is possible. I mean, I'm not the best player in the world. So,
Now here's some absolute massive copium for you. Maybe maybe there is a world. This is not a good world, but maybe there is a world where Omnimon Royal Knights.
What?
It's not a good world, but for Ultimate Cup, we have enough Omnimons, and then to be able to just. It's not good. Your start is going to be insanely slow, but you could just build mono white Royal Knights using Omnimon.
How the hell do you even play that though?
Again, it's not very good.
I was like,
Um,
how do you play that? I mean, there
you're
are
just hard.
definitely enough Omnimons.
Yeah. So the
Um,
idea is you're just going to be hard playing Omnimon to then get sucked into
yeah,
Yggdrasil and then wait until the actual Omnimon that interacts with Yggdrasil comes down, and then you just have a line of Omnimons just swinging. And then you're probably gonna shift to try to use the Sistermons a little bit more as like your resource engine, and then you still have Omecamon, you still have your options. And if you really wanted to, you could even tech in the uh, Digimon Emperor Tamer, even though he's not that great, just
it
because
helps.
it
Helps against those
helps.
lower matchups, those aggro matchups. It helps.
It helps because you're secure. You most of the time the opponent's Digimon is going to be dying because the fact that you're Omnimon and your whole deck is Omnimons, which is going to be bare minimum 14k and above DP. But like, I'm just saying there is a very crazy world where somebody could just shuffle up a pure white Omnimon Royal Knight deck.
No, I'm here for it. So, somebody wants to get that deep and do that. I'm down to
Because
see
how
what it
many
is.
how many different Omnimons do we have? So we have BT1
There are a lot
Omnimon.
of Omnimons, though, man.
Well, you more specifically want to run the Royal Knight Omnimons, just because the other Omnimons they're Holy Warriors, they're not Royal Knights. So we have BT1 Omni, we have BT5 Omni, then we have Omni X from BT5 as well. Then we have that's not a Royal Knight. Dang. Then we have Omni X from BT7 BT not 7. BT10. And then we have this Omnimon from BT13. So those are the Royal Knight Omnimons. So if we just max all of these out at 4, how many cards are we looking at? So we have 5 different Omnimons. 5 times 4 is like 20. Yeah. So you have 20 Omnimons you could play in the deck. That's
I
not
mean,
great, but
that is true, but how do you even? I think you'd have to use like you could use Omecamons,
yeah, you'd have to use
the
probably
sisters
sisters and Omechas.
for
Uh
draw power.
and then you'd have the option. I'm not trying to theory craft it. I'm just trying to say like there is a world where somebody would consider trying to do that for Ultimate Cup.
Somebody who does it, hit me up. I'm down to I'm down to run through some stupid ideas. That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, I think this Ultimate Cup is probably going to be like I always never really enjoyed Ultimate Cups. I always find the format to be rough. Just because like it's slower and slower doesn't necessarily mean it's more enjoyable. In some aspects it is, but I wish like we still had some of the good decks that people would actually want to play cuz out of like the big decks, about half of them aren't even playable.
Yeah, I was like,
Because
a
you
good
can't
chunk of
play,
them are
yeah,
literally
because you
unplayable.
can't play Cross, because Cross is still good in BT13. Don't let anyone fool you. Cross is still good. It is primarily Cross 7 superior, just because he has more options to be able to deal with stuff. But, like, Cross is still a good deck. Um, then you have Hunters. Shine got nerfed, so that kind of counts a little bit. You can't play Royal Knights. Um, like there's just a lot that this format renders unplayable, and I think that's the biggest crime of the format.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool decks. Um, that you just don't have access to, which I mean sucks. But I mean, what can you do? Like, it's okay. It just sucks that we have to deal with that.
Yeah. And then as far as like events down the line, I don't know if we're actually getting a GP this year. The previous 2 years we had GPs. One was All Force themed, and then the other was Gallantmon themed. So I don't know if the GP is going to come back and be something else, or I'm just I have no idea because usually, like right now, we know their list of events all the way up until the end of what, August? No, November. And usually, November, October is the time that a GP is ran. They usually have done it in the past. GenCon is the first foray with the GP, and then they run an online GP again in October, November, and we don't have that. So maybe we're literally just losing GPs, and if we do, I think that's a shame.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. Those events are cool, man. The prizing is always super cool.
Cause yeah, it's something that would attract me, a player who has an invite to actually play, because I already have zero interest in Ultimate Cup, so I'm not going to be playing in any of those. I don't need to play in any more regionals. I might play in one for what, BT14 format, just to dip my toes into that. But I already know regional, or not regional, nationals next year is going to be, it's probably going to be BT15.
Yeah, but it that sounds about right,
So,
actually.
like, I don't reasonably need to practice BT14 if I know that bare minimum EX5 is going to be what regional or nationals is going to be. So, like, it puts people like me in a weird position. I mean, I like playing Digimon, so like I said, I'll play in maybe a BT14 event just to see what BT14 high competitive is like. And then obviously I'm going to be running my own events just because I don't need to play, so I could use that time for something more constructive to host events for people who want to just come in and just chill and have fun and play.
Yeah, I mean, we're having fun with the events we're doing. I'm pretty happy with like yesterday's event was super fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, I was testing out Magna and I learned a lot in just one event of just playing Magna for 3 rounds. Like, you could learn, if you know what you're looking for and know the faults of the deck based on how it's performing, rapid iteration does absolute wonders. Because I was playing it today at locals and it was performing a little bit better. It still has some very, very deep rooted, baked in problems. But I got it to
Of course.
be, yeah, through yesterday's event and through that rapid iteration, I definitely got it into a more comfortable state. Is it something I would take to an event? No. But I got it to be better.
Yeah, it's just about getting some games in repetition, get it in, and try the deck. That's really just the gist of it. Which I mean, how you don't learn unless you play and then win, lose, however much, whatever you learn from it. That's really all that matters. So, I I had fun. I got to test some different things that I was doing with my deck. I enjoyed the time that was there. Cool people, played some good games. So I'm quite happy with the events and all that other stuff. So
But yeah, so I think BT13, since we're stuck in this for a little bit longer, I think BT13 is in a pretty good state. We have Rising Winds coming out. There's 4 new decks that you could think about trying to spice things up a little bit. I personally don't think they're going to have huge impact, but just more cards, more decks, reprints to make the game more accessible is always a good thing.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like it only gets better as we keep going. So
But as far as where the meta is, outside of the, I don't think the meta is reasonably going to change a whole lot. Like, I think maybe the fifth best deck slot, that's probably going to be what is up for grabs that could actually change. But in terms of like the top three, I think they're pretty solidified in being the top three, which again is going to be Shine Greymon, Hunters, and Red Black Greymon.
Yeah. I mean, it should be okay. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, because like if you think about it, we have a pretty nice triangle in terms of like how they kind of like counteract and balance each other. Because you have Shine, which is basically like the combo deck. Then you have the aggro deck, which is basically Hunters, and then you have Red Black Greymon acting as your control deck. But Shine and Red Black Greymon also can flip flop their roles. So they could be more of the combo based deck, or they could be more of the control deck, depending on how you tech it. And I think like that's just a nice little triangle to have, especially since like Red Black Greymons is probably one of the only decks that's keeping tamer based decks in check. Um, Marcus is a very hard tamer to deal with if they have a Rise Greymon out. Then you could just start saving them anyway. So it has this very interesting dynamic that I think just naturally is just what people would have leaned towards in terms of like known best decks.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be anything surprising, but I mean, it could change. You never know. People will adapt and they'll make their own things that sound or that are better to them. So I'm interested and I'm excited to see where this meta goes because I only think it's going to get better.
I mean, competitive event wise, we're likely not to see any more data. So, but we're stuck in this till October pretty much. So, it's definitely going to be a fun format. Everything looks pretty solid. There's nothing overtly hardcore dominating outside of Shine Greymon, which was to be expected, and I think that's more due to play rate. A lot of these decks do feel very even ground in terms of power. Games are, at least in my experience, seem a lot closer in terms of like actual good, healthy back and forth gameplay or just match data.
Yeah, I mean, I'm beyond happy with the way that the meta feels at the current moment. Um, I don't think I play a game and I'm like, wow, that sucked. I just will always auto lose. No, for the most part, I think every deck has a way to play out of situations. So I'm quite happy with it, and I'm interested to see what changes as we continue learning with some of the decks and what people adapt. Because people are gonna find some dumb interaction. That's just how it always is. Someone's gonna find something hilarious that dumpsters an archetype that we're used to seeing never get lose. For example, Shine Greymon. So we'll see.
Well, that's where Jellymon kind of fits in from Rising Winds, is because it can hose on Marcus. And that's why people were teching in Sorai to hose on Marcus for blue decks, which could help like other decks as well, depending on their tech. So it is all like the meta has developed and it's all about techs at this point. Like what is your tech to be able to try to deal against some of the top decks? And I think those techs right now are going to define a deck's success.
Yeah, I agree there. We're kind
Especially
of in that
since
point.
yeah, especially since the last time we took a look at like the big match spread breakdown, a lot of the decks were in the 49 range on the low end to as high as 60% on the high side. So that's a pretty decent range in terms of like, okay, nothing is overtly just hardcore straight up getting dogged and nuked on outside of some minor matchups here and there. So having a 49 to like 55 or 60% like spread isn't bad.
No, I think it's far from bad. I think it's actually quite good because we need those. There's always gonna your deck will always have a bad matchup. That's just how the games are usually made, unless it's not balanced, and then that's a different story altogether. We could talk about that at a different point. But for the most part, your deck should always have a good or have matchups that are very good against and matchups that are very bad against. So you can't take that like you have to be willing to take that in stride because if you're getting bothered that your deck loses to certain things, tech things to beat those things if it's able to. If it's not, then you kind of just have to deal with it.
I mean, that works for Belfmon versus Royal Knights. So that the logic is sound, and it's just all about smart applications on what you're losing to and what you have to be able to deal with it.
Exactly.
But the meta is in a good state. I'm happy where it is. Rising Winds is on the horizon along with some Ultimate Cups, so we'll see what happens with the Ultimate Cups and how those actually develop. I think maybe we have a couple of Ultimate Cups under Rising Winds, which might help Ultimate Cups because most of those decks are monocolor except for Gamamon. He's the only one that's not really monocolor. I think you also can't play Monzimon because it uses some exclusively yellow cards in a yellow-black deck, while also exclusively using some black cards too. So you have two decks for Ultimate Cup if Rising Winds is in an Ultimate Cup to look forward to, and I'm just digging the current state of the game.
Yeah, I have little to zero complaints about the current state of the game. So I'd like to continue and hope it stays being good.
One can only hope. That is definitely the dream. But on that note, let's wrap things up here. And I want to thank everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please make sure to share the fact that we have this podcast with others just to help it spread, along with posting it on various other social medias. That always helps, on top of leaving a rating review, while also liking, subscribing, following on all of the different platforms that the podcast is on. That always just helps with the metrics in general. And I want to thank everyone again for listening or watching, and we will see you next time.